Hey, gun people. Nurse Alex, part 4, new information. Okay, so here's the nurse playing a victim. Poor thing. She's beat up by the mean cop because she was a lawyer. I am going to go over several things here that hopefully I'm going to ask questions and maybe have people think rationally and question both sides instead of repeating the media mantra of nurse good, cop bad, unconstitutional, Fourth Amendment, Birchfield, all the keywords that most people don't even understand in the first place. They're just hollering out and repeating it. So let's go over some questions and answers, and if you pay attention, you might learn something. You might actually change your mind and have to critical think. I know there's a lot of that don't, but I know my regular viewers will get it. So let's look at some things. So let's talk about a few things here. I think the main issues that most people are concerned with here is the blood draw, whether it was legal, whether or not there was obstruction of officer, whether or not the nurse was playing a lawyer, whether or not she resisted arrest, whether or not she was really protecting her patients and patient care, maybe conflicting policies, maybe conflicting laws, some egos, some power trips, some right fighters, and people were doing their jobs and following orders and policy. For some reason, everybody wants to see all this in the nurse's favor, and nobody wants to look at this from the cop's perspective because he's a bully, a brute, etc. So let's just think, try to keep an open mind. I know that's hard when you only have 2 brain cells, they might fall out, but again, my viewers will get it. Let's talk about the Fourth Amendment that everybody wants to keep hollering and screaming about. Fourth Amendment is about unreasonable search and seizure. Okay? No warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause. We have several violations of the Fourth Amendment every day in our life, and I could probably make a list of 100 things. And I'm not saying that it's right to violate the Fourth Amendment, but I'm saying you can't claim absolute Fourth Amendment protection when it fits you and then allow the government to do implied consent. Implied consent does not require a warrant. That's technically in violation of the Fourth. Searches at the airports does not require a warrant. That's technically a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Seizure of weapons during crisis. Right now they're seizing the Virgin Island weapons. That's seizure of personal property by the government with no warrant. Search of vehicles. Supreme Court has ruled you don't need a warrant to search a vehicle. Cops search vehicles routinely on traffic stops. No warrants. That's technically a violation of Fourth Amendment. Search of a person when I contact you for weapons. As a law enforcement officer, I can pat you down and search for weapons. No warrant required. I don't need a warrant when exigent circumstances are in play. And exigent, there's a lot of things for exigent. Destruction, protection of evidence, fleeing suspects. So there's plenty of violations of the Fourth Amendment. But when it fits the nurse's minor scope here, people want to holler Fourth Amendment. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying we shouldn't defend it. All I'm saying is stop looking at this so biased toward the nurse, and which makes you ignorant and unable to realize that there is 2 sides. The law is multi-level, multiple complex, multiple judges. You never get judges and lawyers to agree on the law. The law is not black and white, and cops are always fumbling through this net to try and not get trapped in it. So for people that think cops just go out there and can do anything they want, I mean, look, most of my videos are against cops using too much force. I am against government power. I think government's out of control. But when government is right and cops are acting within the current rules of government, I call it like I see it. And when citizens who are not cops try to play lawyers, I call that too, but it's not popular. So everybody wants to go, oh, well, the news report said this, so it must be true. If you're getting all your information from what the news tells you, we call that a clue. So the Fourth Amendment also only protects against searches and seizures by the government. People confuse this all the time. As a private citizen, I can kick in your door, search your house, find evidence, turn it over to the police, and the government can use that evidence against you, even though I got it without a warrant, because I am not government. People confuse the Constitution as always applying, and unfortunately, the Constitution is supposed to restrict government actions, not private people actions, which is why private businesses can do things. And I can do things not as government that I cannot do if I'm representing government. Or if the government hires me as their agent to represent them, then I can't do it. So that's hopefully gives you a little idea of the Fourth Amendment, since everybody wants to keep screaming it. Most of them don't even know what it is. Let's take a look at Utah implied consent and the Birchfield, North Dakota, because everybody wants to keep hollering, Birchfield, Birchfield, oh. Okay. Birchfield did not undo implied consent. Birchfield said that you cannot take blood if you have criminal penalties against somebody. So if you're taking blood and there's criminal penalties, you can't use the blood. However, if it's civil penalties, Birchfield did not address that. Utah's implied consent only has civil penalties such as suspension of a license. Therefore, Birchfield does not apply. Now, here comes all the lawyers right now. Birchfield's from the Supreme Court. You don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot. No, all right, whatever, you freaking idiots. Birchfield applies if implied consent has criminal penalties. If it doesn't, it does not apply. Utah's implied consent has civil penalty. Birchfield does not apply. Nobody wants to hear that or learn that because they're just too busy throwing out keywords. That's the way it is on the internet now. You can appear smart and act like you've done something. I guarantee you most people commenting have never written a warrant, never had to defend a warrant in court, never been in court, never had to defend their actions on tape in court, having lawyers and appeals, and all people trying to prove you wrong. Okay? As a cop for over 30 years, I've done this several times, so I have a little experience. Everybody wants to look, ooh, you've never been a nurse. You don't have any experience. You don't know what nurses go through. I have been a cop, and I do know what cops go through, so I have a little experience. But if it doesn't fit your agenda, you can just come here and play comment lawyer and tell everybody how they're wrong. So in Utah, you can take blood from an unconscious person via implied consent. Everybody's going to say Birchfield says you can't. They're wrong. You can in Utah. If you suspect the person of being involved in a crime of drunk driving or under the influence, etc., in a vehicle, that's where implied consent, when it was written, how it was construed to mean. The problem here is the officer, which I still don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows, they're saying they were trying to take it to prove the victim was not under the influence, which means they're not looking for a crime, which means they're not suspecting him of a crime. Therefore, the implied consent did not attach to the unconscious victim. So technically, just like technically on the Fourth Amendment, there's a lot of violations. Technically, the officer didn't have the right to use implied consent in order to get blood from somebody that he did not suspect. So was he wrong? In the letter of the law, yes, but the law is intended for the spirit and intent of the law. And it also covers cops, and I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just telling you the law. You can get mad at it, call your legislator and have them write new law. I'm telling you, cops are protected when they are doing their job unless they are showed malice and the absolute knew. This cop thought he was pulling it under implied consent. He had his lieutenant telling him to pull the blood. He was following orders from a superior, which he could be fired. And I know all the people are going to start screaming, that's Hitler, that's killing. We're not talking about killing somebody, people. We're talking about taking blood in an approved manner that has been done before, that's going to be held as evidence, and that the courts and lawyers are going to be able to review later and determine if it was pulled legally and if it can be used. And if it was illegal, the courts will decide that it was illegal and it can't be used, not nurses. That's my point. Nobody wants to hear it. And even though the law is out there and all this is here, it will still take 20 lawyers and judges to decide who's right and wrong. Legal is never black and white. You can never even get the Supreme Court justices to all agree. You very rarely have a unanimous decision. And in fact, Birchfield in North Dakota was not unanimous. So if the law was so clear and perfect, why do we have appeals court, state Supreme Court, and then we have the Supreme Court, and very rarely do we get unanimous decisions? We call that a clue. The law is fluid, it moves, it depends. There's all kind of variables. So for the idiots to come here and start screaming, Birchfield, Fourth Amendment, the nurse is right, the cop's wrong, blah, 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 blah. It's just a ludicrous argument that, and when I call him out on it, suddenly I'm attacked crazy. So the news reports are saying this was a violent arrest. This wasn't a violent arrest. But the people reading the news are all like, oh my God, he chased her and put handcuffs on her. Are you kidding me? The nurse screams for help and he chased her down. She resisted arrest. He, in his mind, was making a lawful arrest. He will not be charged and he will not face any penalties for what he did. And I know nobody wants to hear that and they want to say I'm taking a cop's side. I don't care if he gets penalty or goes to prison. I have no dog in this fight. I'm telling you from a cop's perspective, this cop is covered in 10 ways to Sunday, and nobody wants to hear it, and nobody wants to think that the laws are out there like that. But this cop is not getting anything out of this. If he gets anything, he's going to get a settlement for getting slandered by his agencies, and he's going to get a nice fat government retirement for the rest of his life, and he's going to walk away smiling while all you idiots are saying here how wrong he was. Okay? The news report's also saying the nurse is right, the cop's wrong. Hospital supports the nurse. The police say the cop is wrong. Yet the investigation just started to gather facts. And the media has already had conclusions. And everybody in the comments of my last 3 or 4 videos have all had conclusions when they simply do not have the facts. They don't see the situation from both sides, from the cop and the nurse side, which is what I'm trying to get you to do. And like I said, you might learn something if you listen. So let's take a look at some questions here on, did she know, Alex Super Nurse, did she know the hospital policy does not trump law? Because everybody's saying she was following policy. And when cops follow policy, everybody says policy doesn't trump the law. They're still required to law. And Nurse Alex is not a lawyer. Okay, so did she know, does she realize, because she kept pointing to this policy. And, you know, the officer did not explain it well, because he would have said, I'm pulling an implied consent. Maybe he did. I don't know. Again, I don't know all the facts. But from what I'm learning and what I'm hearing, and as more information comes out, the cop was acting in a lawful investigation that he thought was lawful, following the orders in the scope of his employment, which means he has limited immunity. As much as you people don't like it and don't want to hear it and think I'm protecting the cop, that's the law. Okay, she said, everybody is saying now that she was worried about patient care, and I don't know about a burn unit, and burn patients are so sensitive, and you have to wear a mask, and how dare a cop try to go in there? Look, I don't think cops ought to be drawing blood in the first place, but I don't make the rules. Utah law says cops can draw blood. I don't like it, I don't agree with it, but that's the law. Okay, I'm not going to run around and call everybody idiots and hope they die because Utah says cops can draw blood. So, Super Nurse Alex said, if you had a warrant or if he was under arrest, there would be no problem. She would allow him to draw blood. Okay? So patient care and his health was not an issue or a primary concern. She never said drawing blood on this patient will hurt it, will negatively impact his care. We can't go in there and draw blood. I'm sure they drew blood when they tested him. There was blood there. Everybody's saying they already drew blood. Why don't they use that? There's all kind of legal issues when they draw it, when it's not drawn. Yes, the hospital gave him meds. Yes, he's going to have drugs in his system, but the test can determine what are prescription drugs and if there was illegal drugs or alcohol in there, and the dissipation rate in the body, 0.02 per hour. All the formulas are there. But the longer they wait, the more they're losing evidence. I still don't know what the urgency was and why they needed this blood so urgently. But again, the investigation isn't done, and nobody, including me, knows all the facts. Yet everyone else has the right answer, and I'm wrong. Okay, first of all, policy is guidance. It's not law. Policy can never override law. That's in the law. You can't make policy against the law. Okay, again, just ask yourself these questions. I'm not saying that you have to agree with me. Just try to be reasonable for a minute. Cops are protected when they're doing a job. If they are in the scope of employment and when in policy, they get limited immunity. Was there a police ongoing investigation? Was this cop there having kicks, just wanting to have fun and push around and be a bully? Or was he actually doing an investigation that he was ordered by his lieutenant? The answer is yes. It wasn't an investigation. Was the officer conducting this investigation? Yes. He was in the scope of employment. and within policy and following orders from his lieutenant per policy. He has no liability. Rick, you're just taking a cop's side. It's not fair. You bootleg jack. I'm just telling you the law, people. You don't have to agree with it. I'm just telling you. So go ahead and make all your comments about how I should die and be stabbed. I mean, I just can't believe the viciousness of the comments of people on this topic. Did he overreact on arrest? And was he being delayed by the nurse? Yes, I think he did overreact on the arrest. I don't think she physically tried to stop him. There is no law that says delaying and obstructing an officer has to be physical. I like it. When I made an arrest, I wanted it to be physical because it made my case stronger. But there is no law. So was this a lawful arrest? I think it was, according to the law. I'm not saying the cop was super cop and did everything right. Per the law, I think he's okay. I could be wrong. You know, we'll never know until he gets to the Supreme Court and then 4 judges say yeah and 3 say no or whatever. Was he being delayed by the nurse? Absolutely he was. Was she intentionally delaying him? Was she trying to? It doesn't matter. She was delaying. He was there for over an hour. I might add that for over that hour, she didn't check on her patients, and her patient was in her care. She was too busy playing a lawyer. But nobody wants to hear that because Super Nurse was perfect and the cop was wrong. Okay, so everybody's saying, why didn't he get a warrant? People don't understand a warrant. In order to get a warrant, you have to have a crime. These cops were seeking this blood to prove the guy was not guilty and was not under the influence. And I don't know why they were trying to do that. I heard that the agency called them and asked them to take a courtesy blood draw. And that's why they went over there. I don't know if that's true because there's no investigation. I don't know what was said and who said and she said. But they were not trying to convict this guy of a crime. They were not trying to cover their ass because they were in a pursuit. Because, to be honest, they don't care if a guy kills somebody when they're chasing them. Cops aren't liable for what people do when they run. So, all these things that want to support people's hate of the cop, it just isn't fair and it's not right. So, okay. So, was he being delayed by the nurse? Absolutely. No warrant, no crime. They weren't seeking evidence against him. You can't get a warrant unless you have a crime. You can't get a warrant unless you have a crime and you tell the judge by oath that I think I will find evidence of this crime, and you have to list the crime, where I want to search. Therefore, I have to say, I think this guy was drunk driving and I think his blood contains alcohol. Therefore, I want to search his body, take his blood to find alcohol to prove the crime that he was driving an influence. They weren't trying to prove he was driving an influence. They were trying to prove he wasn't. Now, legally, I don't know where they come from in that, and I don't know. But somehow, that's what was in their mind, and I don't know the facts. But it was still a lawful investigation conducted by a lawful agency, and we tell other people, don't resist cops, fight it in court. That's what lawyers and judges are for. But for some reason, it doesn't apply to nurses now, because Nurse Alex has a cape that says Super Nurse. Okay, others say, why didn't he get a subpoena? You can't get a subpoena unless there's already been charges filed. Subpoenas are issued after charges are filed. So unless they had somebody charged, then the DA can issue a subpoena and go get it. And a subpoena is about like a warrant. It's a court order, except the DA doesn't have to do an affidavit and swear and do all that. They're just allowed to issue because they're officers of the court. And as a DA investigator, cops used to issue subpoenas. I'm not saying I agree with it, but we had the authority. Somebody told us no, we go out in the car, write out a subpoena and say, give it to us. So it was a subpoena to take them for usually documents, but that's the way it worked. And again, people are going to scream and cry, you bootleg! All right, whatever. Exigent circumstances. Many people don't understand that you don't need a warrant, and the Fourth Amendment that everybody wants to scream about doesn't apply with exigent circumstances. The courts have said the Fourth Amendment can be ignored under exigent circumstances. And one of the exigent circumstances is prevention and destruction and loss of evidence. Evidence is an exigency. The blood and the blood accuracy is being degraded or lessened the amount of the alcohol. The longer we wait, the more evidence that we're trying to get is being destroyed. But again, what's the purpose of getting it? To prove he's innocent? I still don't get that. Okay, no hospital policy states, everybody's talking about a hospital policy. I guarantee you no hospital policy states that you will fight, argue, tell police how to do their job, And I'm sure nurses would love it if cops went in and started telling them how to care for patients. They wouldn't like it. They wouldn't accept it. It wouldn't be right. It's not right when nurses do it. I don't want to hear this. The nurse has supreme authority and to do everything that we tell everybody else they can't do. Every law enforcement agency has a policy that if a cop refuses an order from his superior, it's insubordination and he can be terminated. I don't say you have to like it. I know you can't follow unlawful orders. I know everybody wants to scream about the Nazis and orders and Vietnam and all this other crap. I'm just telling you. Every agency I know, have worked with, or have ever talked to or dealt with has a policy that if a cop doesn't follow orders, he can be terminated. So, was the cop being coerced to do this? Maybe. Maybe he was being coerced. Cops can lie in a course of investigation. Why didn't a cop lie? I mean, the victim's unconscious. All he had to do, if he was being unethical and crooked like everybody is claiming, why didn't he just say to the nurse, okay, he's under arrest. Let me go take the blood. I mean, just ask yourself that question. I mean, it makes sense. Same thing. If he said that, would the nurse then say, well, what's your PC for arrest? I don't think that's good PC. I don't think the arrest is lawful. I'm not. Where does it stop when the nurse doesn't have to play lawyer? When does she have to follow the law? If he comes with a warrant, why can't the nurse say, I don't think this warrant is accurate. I think you left out information. I don't think the judge has all the facts. I think your PC is lacking. I'm not going to respect this warrant. I've had this actually happen when I've taken a warrant to hospital. They said my warrant was no good. So don't tell me it can't happen and it wouldn't happen, because it happened to me and I experienced it. So where does it stop when you start letting nurses question cops on how they do their job? That's the point I'm trying to get people to critically think and evaluate. People, including lawyer nurses, cannot interfere, obstruct, and delay an officer in the performance of his duties. That's law. It's not policy. I know nobody wants to hear it. Sorry, I'm the bearer of bad news. The nurse did not know about the Birchfield case when she did it, so everybody's running around saying, Birchfield, she can't obstruct. She has a right to obstruct an unlawful arrest in Utah. Look, none of that. Cops are judged on what they knew at the time when they made their decision. That's how the courts rule on them. They don't say what they found out later or what they can dig up after everyone else gets it in the press and starts adding stuff. I guarantee you she never mentioned Birchfield when she was explaining this to the cop. She shouldn't have been explaining anyway. She should have been taking care of her damn patients. That's my biggest thing, is why is she out there dealing, which is why the new policy has changed that. All right, so we tell black people all the time on the street when they get beat up, you ought to just comply with the officer and then fight in court. Why should it be different for nurses? If the nurse was right, why did the hospital change the policy the next day, making it wrong if she did the same thing? And everybody wants to argue this, but I'm going to play the video here in a second of what the nurse said, and it is absolutely says nurses is primary care patient and will not get involved with law enforcement. And that is absolutely what she did, and if she did it today with the new policy, she would be wrong. Now, everyone else wants to play if, and, buts, and coconuts and say, no. The policy was to stop the cops from beating nurses. Look, you can't have it both ways. The policy makes what she did illegal today, according to their policy. Not illegal, but against their policy. Okay, cops are not nurses. When somebody says cops are not nurses, everyone cheers. When somebody says nurses are not cops or lawyers, everyone cries cops are bad. I mean, the hypocrisy is just amazing. I always say legal questions are always answered with maybe and it depends. People think everything's black and white in a court. That's not true. That's why you need lawyer and judges fighting out every court. That's why cases get appealed. That's why they get overturned. That's why they're reappealed and get overturned again. That's why they go to Supreme Court and you never get rarely get a unanimous decision. The law is not written in stone. It's not simple. And people who are here arguing that it's simple and everybody violated it and it's very clear, they just don't have a clue. I'm sorry. In my mind, this nurse chose to argue with the cops. I've had nurses comment on the video, and they've said, you know what, she should have said, talk to the supervisor. I don't have time to deal with this. I have to take care of patients. And she should have disengaged herself and let someone else figure it out. And I know everybody, well, she's the charge nurse, and she had to, and she was protected, and she was Look, people, she chose to be there. She had a supervisor on her phone. She could have just told the cop, call the supervisor. Here's his number. Talk to, look, and the cop, on the other hand, could have just said, you know what? I appreciate your input. I'm conducting a lawful investigation. I'm seizing this evidence under implied consent, and I'm going back to the patient. And he could have walked back there and took the blood. And then the first time someone put their hand on him to stop him, then he should have arrested him. And I know that's going to get people upset. Well, whatever. Go cry me a river with all your liberal tears. Nurses are not lawyers, should not play them in hospital. Patient care is not playing lawyer. Implying that the nurse's job is to practice illegally is just stupid. So now all crooks who are arrested when they go to the hospital, they get free legal advice from nurses. That's brilliant. That's just unreasonable, and it takes away from patient care, which is everybody keeps crying about. It's all about the patient. It's all about the patient unless Nurse Alex wants to play lawyer for an hour and a half and argue with a cop. Then it's still about the patient. Can't have it both ways, people. You just come off as an idiot. Nurses do not know all police policies and laws, but somehow only their policy matters. Okay, and I know that the PD agreed with the policy, but hey, you know what? This is a convoluted case with a lot of issues. Everybody wants to make it simple. Everybody wants to read the newspaper and say, oh, well, the news said this, it must be right. Everybody wants to listen to a press conference where everybody's telling everybody how great they did. And you know what? You don't know all the facts, and neither do I. I've said it 1,000 times. Okay, a cop defends a cop, and suddenly he's an idiot. Everybody defends a nurse, and wow, they must be smart and right because the nurse is right. Where's the hypocrisy, people? Come on. People who don't know what cops do, it's a spider web of legal requirements out there. Cops are always trying to manipulate. We're always getting advice from lawyers, from the DA's office, from case law, from changes in the law each year, from new laws, from the legislation. There's a lot of stuff that goes in a cop, and everybody's like, cops are just out there beating up people. They don't have to know anything. Okay. Well, I mean, you can live in your own world. I don't really care. And like I said, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm retired. I got my check. I don't care. All right, are people aware that this nurse and officer had a prior history of disagreements when the cop was working as an ambulance driver? Anybody aware of that? Of course not. Nobody's hearing that, okay? Was this a personal power trip for the nurse on this officer because she knew he was an EMT and nurses are higher than EMTs and she'd like to be telling EMTs what to do because she's higher, and now that the EMT that she didn't really like or get along with suddenly is a police officer, and she doesn't like it, so she's going to argue with him. Just ask yourself, would that be a contributing factor to this incident, and would that fact change anybody's mind? I know everybody's going to be like, it doesn't matter, the nurse is right, the cop was wrong. Okay, nurse did not physically resist or obstruct. I agree. I think the cop jumped the gun, but it was still a lawful arrest per the arrest. And no DA is going to file on that cop, and no jury is going to convict it. And no DA is going to file on the nurse for resisting, and no jury would convict her. But that doesn't change the fact that what the cop did was within the scope of his employment and within policy. And that's what people don't want to get. They think I'm taking a cop's side. I'm just telling you the law, people. Open your ears and quit trying to argue for being right. Okay? I don't trust government. I don't trust government, police, or hospitals. But arguing with cops during an arrest or investigation never turns out well. Even if you're right, even if I concede that the nurse was 100% right, she still can't obstruct an investigation and run from the cops. Because if she can do it, other nurses can do it, doctors can do it, people on the street can do it, and then why the hell do cops want to deal with anything? They'll go, you know what, everybody can tell us go to hell. We'll just sit and eat donuts. And then people complain about that. Okay, nurses, the nurse was not assaulted. You're not assaulted. She was taken into custody. She ran away. She was resisting arrest. Now people are saying, oh, it was good that the nurse resisted arrest. She should resist arrest. We don't tell anybody else that. Suddenly we tell the nurse it's good she resisted arrest. Man, the level of hypocrisy in this case just amazes me. Okay, if the blood draw was illegal, the courts would throw it out. Not nurses. I mean, I don't get how people don't get that. No, I would not say I'd want this nurse arguing. People are always asking me, well, wouldn't you want, if you were unconscious, want this nurse arguing for your rights? No, I wouldn't. I didn't hire this nurse as my lawyer. Her job is to keep me alive, keep me sanitized, keep my dressings good, not let me get infected, and care about my health. I would not want a nurse arguing and playing lawyer for me. I do not need that. I will hire a lawyer if I want that. If the cops do something illegal, I will take them to court and fight it illegally later. I do not want nurses and doctors being distracted and trying to play lawyers when their job at the hospital is to take care of me. So everyone that keeps asking me that 1,000 times, my answer is no. If I'm ever in a hospital, no, I don't want nurses being my lawyer. All right? I'll deal with it when and if I live and get out of the hospital alive, which might be a chore in itself. Okay, let me go. Okay, we're winding down. A couple of comments. I'm going to talk about HIPAA here in a second because everybody wants to read that. Okay, I don't think cops should be drawing blood, but obviously Utah does. Okay, hey, they don't have a problem with it. I got a problem with it. I don't make the laws. Everybody's saying, why are cops drawing blood? Maybe it's because EMT, evidently it's an approved procedure that's been done before. This nurse had a problem with it because she didn't like the EMT, and because he wasn't an EMT, he was a cop. So she wanted to ignore her patients and fight with and argue with him. Rick, how can you? All right, whatever. Look, I don't have a dog in this fight. The truth is, nobody wants to admit that both sides were wrong and both sides are right. Maybe they were good people. Maybe they were trying to do the right thing. You know, whatever it is. Both sides need to admit that this isn't optional. Both sides changed their policy. The cops and the hospital changed their policy. We call that a clue. Okay, the new policy. Let's play a quick video of the new policy where this nurse plainly lays out what I said she said, and everybody wants to argue about it. Okay, so this is the head nurse who made the policy talking. I've read all kind of lies in the newspaper and in the comments about what she said. Let's listen to her own words.
Plan. Number one, the nurses do not interact with law enforcement. The nurses who are caring for patients do not interact with law enforcement.
Okay, what did she just say? Nurses caring for patients do not interact with law enforcement. That right there says if this nurse did the same thing today after this policy that she did the day before, she would be wrong. She would be out of policy. Why would a hospital say the nurse did everything right, and instead of making that policy saying, you know what, we want our nurses defending, the new policy is nurses will always protect the patient from law enforcement. That's not what the policy said. That's not what she said. She said they will not interact with law enforcement and they will care for the patient. Now other people want to hear, oh, well, that's to protect them from law enforcement. Doesn't matter how you want to read it. That's what she said. So everybody that's misquoting me and saying it's not true and I'm putting false in her, that's the video. She just said it. Let's see what else she said.
We have house supervisors who are highly skilled and highly trained, and the police officers will interact with those individuals who know all the rules and laws, and we can work those things out together.
She said that the law enforcement will talk to the supervisors who know all the laws. Okay, that's code for nurses don't know all the laws, and they shouldn't be out there playing like they do. They shouldn't be dealing with law enforcement instead of caring for the patient. That's what she said, people. I mean, I don't understand how everybody's misquoting saying I'm lying. I'm playing a video of her words.
Together. The second thing is we will never interact with the police department on a patient care area.
Another thing I'm hearing is cops are no longer allowed in the patient area. She just said they won't interact with cops in the patient area. They won't get into argument about legal issues. Again, she's reiterating nurses' jobs are not to deal with law enforcement, that are to take care of patients. Exactly what Nurse Alex did not do the day before. Now they have this policy the day after, and everyone's saying the nurse did great and it was perfect and the hospital supports her. This doesn't appear the hospital supports her to me. Now, I know you can twist the words, you can see it from your own side, and everybody can say, oh, no, it's to protect the cops, it's not her. The fact of the matter is, if the nurse did the same thing today, she would be out of policy.
This is never acceptable, and if there's a discussion or an issue, it needs to occur outside the patient care environment. So we have implemented that. And then third, of course, both the law enforcement and the University of Hospital have multiple employees. And so to try to keep 2,500 nurses up to speed with all of the different changes in the law is not something that's easily accomplished.
She just said, we can't train all the nurses with all the laws. That's not their job. They should be handling patient care. They shouldn't have to be worried about trying to be lawyers. That's what she said, people.
And so we are taking them totally out of the loop. Their job is to take excellent care of the patients.
She said it again. We're taking nurses out of the loop of the law and cops, and their job is to deal with patients. I don't know how much clearer it can be. Now, the media is reporting something else, and everybody in the comments is saying something else, but I just played the actual video. You can still say I'm lying and making this up. So that's the new policy from the hospital. Now, the new policy and old policy from the police department, I haven't seen it. I would like to see what they change, because then I'd have better insight on whether or not the cop followed policy. Nobody's seeing what policy the cop followed. We're seeing the nurse policy and how it was changed, but we're not seeing what the cop followed. Nobody's saying the cop violated policy yet. We're hearing the cop was relieved of duty, he got fired from his EMT job, blah, 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 blah. But nobody's showing us the policy from the police department. And then lastly is the viciousness of the comments that I'm getting just speaks volumes on what type of people are supporting this nurse and the attitude toward law enforcement. I have never said this cop was perfect and did everything great and I love him, and all I said is according to law, I think he's right in some areas, he's wrong in some areas, and I think the nurse shouldn't be playing lawyer. And the attacks that I have got is unbelievable. They said all cops should be shot. These are some of the comments. I had to delete them. They were just outrageous. All cops should be shot. All cops should be killed. They were wishing I was burnt so I could be in the burn unit and the nurses could just let me die. They were hoping I was killed in the flooding of Texas. They were hoping nurses would let me bleed out if I was ever shot. I mean, let's see. They were saying I should be hung. Nurses were commenting that they hope they get me in their ward. Wow. That's ethics. How'd you like to have one of these nurses work on you? We're saying how great nurses are. I got nurses commenting here they wish they had me in their ward. Wow, that's a leap of faith. I should be stabbed to death and left to die. I mean, there was just so many I had to delete them, but the viciousness of these attacks. Now remember, what's amazing to me is all these real national people are crying about the oath that cops take and how bad the cop was for arresting somebody in a lawful investigation, and he put handcuffs on a nurse and put her in a car. That's really all he did. And the people that support the nurse and saying the Constitution and Fourth Amendment, they're the ones that are saying all these hateful and violent things. Man, I'm telling you, man. Every negative comment about death, killing, stabbing, and how cops should be murdered and all that, they're all coming from people supporting this nurse. We call that a clue. When a battle's lost, slander is the sword of the loser. Okay, so another last topic here, HIPAA. Everybody's claiming HIPAA, HIPAA, HIPAA. HIPAA rules, we got to follow HIPAA, HIPAA, HIPAA. First of all, HIPAA was a damn health insurance act. It's about insurance companies. It's about protecting insurance people with lobbyists that got the stinking law and act passed. This is about government control, and I'm anti-government and government power, and everybody's talking about how cops are out of control. You know what? Government's out of control, and here's a news flash, people. Cops work for the government. Really? Wow, we didn't know that. Idiots. All right, so the big HIPAA, it says right in HIPAA that victims of abuse, neglect, domestic violence, and in certain circumstances are covered may be disclosed. So there is protections for healthcare workers to cooperate with law enforcement and government. So everybody's saying this poor nurse could have been fired. She could have went to prison if she helped. She could have. That's all bullshit. That's all hyper glamorous. It's not going to happen. I've got cases at the bottom here that show what happens when you violate HIPAA, and the government never prosecutes HIPAA unless you're doing something like stealing patient information to get drugs, to steal, to defraud, to sell. You have to be doing some criminal act. It even says in HIPAA that incidental or mistakes will not be prosecuted. So all this crap about HIPAA is going to send everybody to jail, and there's all these rules, and this poor nurse had to follow HIPAA or she could have been in prison, is all just BS, people. Just stop lying and be intellectually honest at least. Here's a violation of HIPAA. $100. That's a violation. And a hospital can get no more than $50,000 per year. Okay? Maybe the nurse would have got, you know what? If there's a nurse out there that cooperates with a cop and gets a HIPAA violation, I'll pay your $100. Email me, show me the report, I'll pay your $100. It won't cost you a damn thing. I'll pay any fine they give you if you're out there doing the right thing and a cop comes in and you cooperate. and you end up getting a HIPAA violation. That is absolutely ridiculous that people are trying to lie and scam on the idiots of people and tell them that this is why she had to do this. There was cases of HIPAA. I mean, prison terms. Some people got it. There's all kind of, you could pause the video and read some of these cases if you want to read them. Look, HIPAA's a freaking joke. So, let's end this thing here. So here's poor Nurse Alex. The victim never did anything wrong, only worried about the patient, even though she never said anything about hurting the health of the patient. It was all about policy, ego, and playing lawyer. She's the victim. The cop's wrong. The nurse is right. All the facts don't matter. The investigation doesn't matter. The laws and the confusion and the contradicting policies and legal mumbo jumbo, none of that matters. The only thing that matters for the people that want to believe it, the media said Nurse Alex was right and the cop was wrong. You know what? I'm all about free thinking. Make your own conclusion. Keep the comments about me dying. If you do, I'll just block you. I'm tired of hearing it. Obviously, you don't have an intellectual conversation and try to learn from this. Hopefully, you got something out of this, and that's my case on the nurse. And I still don't have all the facts. It may even get better as far as I'm concerned once the facts come out. But 6 months, a year from now, when the cop gets paid money and all this settles down and dies and everybody's moved on to the new social warrior justice topic of the week, nobody will care about how much money and taxpayer money and policies and how much has been wasted on this event. All right, we'll end that there.